Friends, do you struggle with painting loose florals? I know I really did when I started painting. Right now, I'm going to show you guys how to paint these really quick and easy loose watercolor poppies, but I didn't get to this point overnight. So as I'm showing you how I'm taping down my paper, getting out my supplies, I'm going to be chatting with you not only how to paint these step by step, but I'm going to be talking about my top 4 tips for painting loose watercolor florals. So you've got to stick around because the last one is the best and it's towards the end, friends. So I am using a 100% cotton watercolor paper here. It is professional. I ask that you use what you have so that you don't feel stressed out, so you don't feel like you have to do a certain type of shopping trip to get out this paper and be able to paint exactly like I am. The other thing is that I am painting on the back side of the paper. Yes, you can paint on the back, you guys. If you didn't know that, it's okay to do. I'm getting in my Winsor Newton watercolor professional set of paints, linked in the description below. Just going to spray them down to get them nice and wet and juicy. But if you have pulp paper, that's that cheap stuff, the student grade, use that. What you need to do is just dive into your loose florals and not worry about all the things. So I'm using my number 6 round brush with a nice cadmium yellow, and we're just going to go ahead and start making these little centers for our poppies. Now I am creating a poppy that's a bit of a mix between some of the ones you are probably used to and you have seen. For example, the classic orangey red poppy has that beautiful black center. But then when you think about the Icelandic poppies with those really bright other colors, you usually see a center that's yellow or that's green or has a combination of those two colors. And so I am starting off with yellow of these centers, but I am going to add in some black later on just to really make them kind of contrasty and stand out. So that's the beauty of art. You can just, you pop in the colors that make sense for you, what you are attracted to, and you use your intuition in the moment, which I'm a huge fan of. So I've got my centers kind of randomly on there. I'm flipping my palette around here so you can see exactly what I am dipping into now. And I've got a beautiful Christy Rice dagger brush here. I will link that below as well. I was using her travel brush just a moment ago. Now, this is my first tip for painting loose florals. Are you ready? Do what I'm doing here, paint fast. So now I know a lot of you, especially when you're starting out, are not into this whole idea of painting fast. But here's why I do it and why it works well for me. When I'm painting fast, my brain is a little bit slower and it takes a bit to catch up in terms of my anxious and worrisome thoughts to my hand as I'm painting. So along the lines of this tutorial, if you guys are getting overwhelmed and feeling like it's going too fast, please by all means take a break, put a pause on this video, and catch yourself up in your own due time. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed or like I'm just, going at a pace that's not comfortable for you. But I would encourage you as we're putting these really loose floral petals in, just kind of using a reference, you saw that briefly at the beginning, and just kind of being aware of the brush strokes I want to make. You can see that I am going from the outside in with my petal shapes, but you can start from the inside out. My brain is not able to start to process, start to judge and analyze in a negative way if I don't like the way that something is turning out. So for me, I'm able to keep it loose because my thoughts are slower and I'm not overwhelming myself with this doesn't look good, I don't like what I did there. All the things that we tend to do to ourselves that really kind of destroy our creative process. So I'd love to know what your creative process is in terms of painting speed. Do you paint quickly? Do you paint slowly? Somewhere in between? And what are your thoughts of the speed of this video? Let me know in comments what you're thinking. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. And it starts the conversation about this beautiful art form and just how we can improve together. So remember, I'm a mental health therapist and I love to include self-care. So at this point, if you are feeling stressed in any way, please take a deep breath, reminding yourself this is supposed to be fun. We are just popping in some random shapes here for some side-facing florals, one more here. And I've got some darker paint and then some lighter paint, and just being very loose, allowing some of those colors to bleed and mix together and not being worried about it. So I'm grabbing some aqua here. This is going to be my vase. I do love a nice sketchy vase. I have switched now to my number 6. Gives me a bit more control with a smaller brush. My second tip for painting loose florals would be, though, to use a large brush. So when you have a large brush, you're picking up a lot of paint, a lot of liquid, and we're just kind of spreading this out. Remember, this is glass. We're trying to emulate just some of the reflections in the glass, and we just left a couple in there, and then we'll go back in and add more details later. So I've got a small brush, of course, because I'm doing these tiny little blue marks that we'll connect later with stems to create some gorgeous little flowers. But when you have a large brush, lots of paint and liquid, you are just going to tend to create bigger brush strokes on your paper. If you have a tiny brush, we tend to hold it very tightly. We can't even use the belly of the brush necessarily to make the whole shape of the petal, at least not as easily. When you have a large brush like what I was working with before, that petal shape just kind of comes into play, as I'm removing a hair there, because that shape is large enough to emulate the petal that you're creating at that time. So I had a dagger brush. You could use a flat wash brush. You could use a large round brush, maybe a number 16, even a 12 would be fine, and just play around with the size and the shapes that you can make. It just makes it really fun and exciting and enjoyable. So I am grabbing a little bit more of that green for the stems here. I'm just quickly putting in the little stems to connect all these blue moments, all these fluffy florals and petals. And it's a very simple accent to add in. I wanted to create a contrast between the warm floral colors, reds, oranges, yellows, pinks, and then adding in a nice blue to kind of balance it all out, as well as I think it goes really nicely with our aqua vase as I'm adding in the little lip of the jar, and we will just, easily sketch that in. You can see that my vase is not completely symmetrical. Not everything is connecting as I'm adding my stems here, just kind of in my head, roughly counting. There we go. Counting up for you guys, about 11 flowers. Just kind of making sure that I have about that many stems in there. So my vase is a little bit wonky, super wonky actually, but that's the look that I'm going for. That's the style that I really like. But feel free to paint in your whole vase if you wanted to. I mean, maybe it's too late. You've probably painted all the things that I painted in as well. But it's just one of those things where you can keep coming back and being creative and trying new things. Now I'm just making these really simple leaf shapes, just using the belly of my brush to put some green down. You can see how simple this is. This is relaxing, easy peasy, easy going. So I'm grabbing my dark paint, which is going to be a Payne's Gray, which is kind of like a navy, and we're going to add those dark centers in. I thought that the yellow was underwhelming, and I just wanted to do something bold. So if you are enjoying this video, guys, please give it a like. I'd love it if you would subscribe to the channel as well. And if you have a comment on what you think so far about the poppies or what you'd like to see me paint next, please let me know below. I love to hear from you guys. I'm just grabbing that dark, and you see that I'm just adding in this burst of lines for the poppy, and then we just add some nice little dots as well. And the contrast is really pretty here. Guys, if you didn't know, I have a new Skillshare class that just came out. The link is in the description below, and it's for 30 days free if you're a new student on there. And it's all about my watercolor beginner secrets and tips. And within that class, we also use those skills to create a beautiful loose watercolor bouquet of flowers. So I hope to see you over there painting with me. I also have a couple other loose floral video classes there too, especially on how to let go of watercolor, perfectionism, and just how to relax and find joy in your paintings. So anyway, fun resources that you can find if you're interested. So I've got my shadow using the same Payne's Gray, and I started with a really light version, so lots of water, a little bit of pigment, and then I started adding in a bit more of that darkness, wet on wet, to the part that's closest to the vase, and then just spreading it out with a clean brush that I have dabbed it, just lightly on a paper towel so that it's just damp and not dripping. All right, now we are switching to a new palette, and the reason is I have some beautiful fluorescents on here, including this fluorescent pink color. We are going to start adding in the pizzazz to these florals. So I want to add in some texture, I want to add in some shadow, and whether I'm using fluorescent paint or something else on the palette, I am working quickly. I am using a smaller brush than I had to make the initial petals, but it's definitely larger than some of the detail brushes I could be using. So you could use like a number 2, which is going to be so tiny. When we use a tiny brush, we tend to make very tiny brush strokes, and we tend to hold it really, really tight in our hands and really close to the tip, which brings me to my third watercolor, loose watercolor florals tip, and that would be to hold your brush loosely. So again, like I just mentioned, we tend to hold and grip things really tightly. And we also tend to hold the brush really close down to the tip, which is not helpful in being loose. Here, I am kind of in the middle there, and I like to be in that middle space. It gives me less control. Now, you might think less control is a bad thing, but it's not, and here's why. Less control means that there's going to be more movement of your brush strokes, more ease, more looseness. When we are tense and we're anxious, we tighten our body, we tighten our muscles, we kind of hunch in, make ourselves smaller, tighter. And when we are trying to be loose and relaxed, we open up our body gestures, our posture. We take a deep breath, our muscles relax, our face relaxes. We kind of open up how our arms are positioned, and it's a good metaphor for when we're trying to be loose. So if you're holding that brush really tight, make sure to loosen up that grip so that you can experience a bit more looseness than you would if you didn't otherwise try this technique. So I will be telling you the fourth thing soon. You got to stay till the end of the video. And it's quite simple, but also I feel like it's the most important tip to be able to paint loose floors, just saying, or even loose landscapes, looseness in general. It's very helpful for that. So I'm doing these brush strokes here. I'm not going slowly. I'm going very quickly. I'm wanting to create a beautiful dimension between that first light layer and then the subsequent layers, which we're probably just going to keep it with one extra layer, I should say. So 2 total. So I'm doing these little sketchy marks, and then sometimes I draw out the color and paint most of the petal. Sometimes I will use several different colors on one flower just to contrast that. Sometimes I like to just leave the one layer and make it very easy and basic. Right now I'm just dabbing on these blue florals to create a little bit more of that pop of color. All right, grabbing a bit of the fluorescent to do my splatter because I absolutely love a nice splatter. That brings a beautiful magical looseness, almost like pollen all around. Just doing a little bit more spreading of this color with a clean damp brush just to make sure the jar is complete. And then taking a little bit more green and just marking up those stems too. Again, a little more pop of color for them as well. So my fourth tip to paint loose watercolor florals is, as we're finishing up this painting, have a clear and loose mindset. So if you think tight and anxious thoughts and worrisome thoughts, perfectionism and all the things, you are going to feel tight and anxious. Take a deep breath, remind yourself to be loose, and it will make a difference.